Thank you everybody for joining this amazing panel. I'm really excited to have three international experts here. Nitin Agrawal, the CEO and co-founder of Interstride, Afsha Randera, an associate attorney at Fragaman, and Graham Nixon, an executive at Mob Squad. Thank you panelists for being here. I think this is a really important topic. I get a lot of, as you know, it's not so easy to find a job as an international student or graduate. There are a lot of barriers, and I'm always telling my students to have backup plans in place so that if their original plan doesn't work out, they can jump right into that. In fact, I wanted to read the statement that my graduate intern prepared on the topic because he's faced this issue recently. He can't join today, but I wanted to thank him and he'll see the recording for helping prepare this statement. So sometimes things just don't go as planned. When that time comes, you want to feel prepared rather than confused. Building backup plans will provide you with certainty and confidence because you now have a plan to act on if, for any reason, you cannot get a job or sponsorship. We all know that the H-1B lottery system can be tricky, so why should you rely on that to decide your career future? So, jumping in, the agenda for today is that we'll start with some introductions of the panelists, and then we'll go into the panel conversations with questions that I have curated for the panelists. After that, we'll open up the Q&A to all of you. If you do have questions over the course of the session, please feel free to type them in the Q&A. We will get to them at the end. And if you have a question for specific panelists, please mention that in your questions so that I can address that to the correct person. And then we'll end with some closing statements. So to start off, panelists, if you could please introduce yourselves in the order of your pictures just to make it easy. Share your name, pronouns, job title, and company/organization. And then how does your current role relate to building backup plans for international students?
Great. I'll go first, Addie. Thank you for inviting me, and always a pleasure to speak to USC students. My name is Nitin. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Interstride. And we started Interstride in 2018 from our own experience as former international students. So in terms of the experience and what led us to this webinar is my own experience as an international student coming from Nepal. So I grew up in Nepal, came to the US in 2003 on an F1 visa. And that itself was a big challenge because there's a lot of anxiety whether or not you'll get an F1 visa, first of all. So I've been lucky in many respects. After my F1, I received my H-1B, graduated from my undergrad, had to then pursued MBA, which took me to California. I was at Berkeley, back on F1 status. But after I graduated, that's when the reality hit me. This time, didn't find an employer, so I had to leave the country. And luckily, again, because of the Berkeley network, I was able to find a job in Brazil. I worked in Norway, came back to the US on an L1 visa. Once I was back on US soil, same company sponsored my green card, led to US citizenship eventually. And from our own learnings and experience, we started Interstride. So that's what my background has been. And so I've gone through a couple of these experiences, but happy to talk through some additional ones as we dive deeper. Thank you.
Wow, I love stories like that. So my name is Afsha Randera. I'm an immigration attorney. My pronouns are she, her. I'm an immigration attorney at Fragaman for their San Diego office, but I'm based in Los Angeles. So sometimes I work in the San Diego office. Sometimes I work in Los Angeles. What was the specific question? How does it contribute towards backup options?
Yeah, how does your current role relate to building backup plans for international students?
So as someone who does corporate immigration, I service big tech clients, for instance, with a lot of their STEM OPT extensions. And by doing that, I, of course, speak to the individuals. A lot of them are international students who are looking for their first job. They have many different things going on. For example, they might have a spouse and they're like, okay, well, you can do H4 EAD. or we help them with their various nationalities. This is another way, apart from just that horrible H-1B lottery, that you can apply for a job and just keep going up, just keep looking for employers. So that's how my job, this is what my job is. So, and I love stories like Nitin's because, you know, it does work, it does happen.
Awesome. Guess I will go next. Pleasure to meet all of you. My name is Graham Nixon. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm the head of growth and strategy at Mom Squad Canada, which is just a fancy word or fancy title for saying, I'd like to get to know all of you. So Mom Squad's been a Canadian company that since 2016 that offers a pretty direct alternative to the H-1B. So we're kind of a, you know, an all-in type of solution that I'd love to walk you all through. Just broad strokes of this, you know, as you are navigating what options you have to stay in the United States, to stay in North America. Mom Squad exists because of Canadian government policies. The Canadian government recognized that we have a shortage of in-demand talent, specifically around STEM roles, but also there are some other roles that we can speak about. And through that partnership, we're essentially able to offer eligible candidates a fast track into Canada, so where you can get expedited permanent residency and citizenship through working with us, while continuing to support the company that you have found in the US. So for many of you, you know, you'll be going out, graduating if you haven't already. In the chance, right, that you do all the right things, you check all the right boxes, but you don't get the H-1B and you're faced with a, you know, drastic alternative, we like to present ourselves as a palatable plan B that can keep you stable in North America for the long term. So getting a lot more in the details of that, but we're sort of the extreme backup option if all other things that Asha and Nitin walk you through don't work out.
Thanks so much, Graham, and thank you, Asha, as well, for sharing your introduction. So let's jump into the questions, the meat of the questions. So the first one is, why did you decide to support international students and graduates by doing what you do? And I know, Nitin, you kind of shared that, if you want to go a little more in depth about that, but this is open to all of you.
I can go if you feel like you've got so much to share too. I actually am a USC alumni. This is why I feel particularly drawn to coming to speak to you guys, particularly drawn to this panel. And I also did not get the best grades while I was at USC. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that I was an international student, and it is a big adjustment moving countries. It's a big adjustment being away from friends and family, being in a different land. Yes, it's California and it's amazing, but maybe that is part of the difficulty as well, because there's so much fun out there. It's very easy to get distracted. And so what I learned was that I really was helped by people who could see my struggles, my fellow international students, my advisors, even my professors. Like, my professors at USC were amazing. And my strength wasn't necessarily my academics, which is extremely helpful in the immigration world, right? If you get good grades, you get the best jobs. So for me, it was always more creative. It was the power of networking and the power of friendships. So I like coming to these things to remind people, you know, it's overwhelming being a student. USC requires so much of you, but do remember, like, your friendships, your people, your professors. And if you're an international, you have your consulates, you have your fellow nationals. So grab onto that network, because yes, you're here for an education, but if really you want to stay somewhere, you're here to build those relationships so you can get those jobs, so that you can meet those people. So yeah, that's actually why I became an immigration lawyer. That was a difficult struggle for me and for all my friends. And I thought, this is something I want to do. I want to help people get into California, to stay into California. I love it. And I also ended up writing, I'm finishing off my book right now, but I'm writing a book called School of Sharks, Becoming a Lawyer Against the Odds. Because when you are someone who struggled with all the things that you struggled being an international, you have so many lessons to share with people. So very impassioned about this subject, because I want all students to feel empowered. It is definitely a tough road, but with creativity, with resilience, with perseverance. And I love Nitin telling us his story about how he had to go back, then he had to come back. Sometimes you have to do that. So just don't lose hope. That's why I like doing this work, just so students feel empowered, because there were times when I felt very low. And I appreciated the people who helped me when I felt that low. And I hope that was enough of an answer.
Great, thank you, Afsha. And I can't wait to see your book when it comes out. Thanks for
I
sharing.
can't wait to share it. Yeah.
I can jump in really quickly because Nitin, I think obviously, or honestly, you have the more interesting story for me. So obviously it's a little bit different. You know, I'm a Canadian calling in from Canada, representing kind of a private company. But my motivation around this is before Mob Squad, I'd worked for a really large global consultancy called McKinsey, where, you know, they solve really big problems for really big clients. And that was an excellent, you know, excellent era of my career. But at that firm, right, I was really just passionate about the people, the recruitment, coaching, professional development, helping others out. And McKinsey in Canada actually was a little bit of a ground where if people had visa issues, they would actually kind of move to the Canadian office temporarily. Obviously, with a company with the resources of McKinsey, that's something fairly easy they can facilitate, but not every company has access to that sort of thing. So when I was thinking about my next steps, I really wanted to do something that could help promote Canada as a country. I'm very passionate about where I live, about what we live. I think it has a lot to offer for people that are looking to make a stable life in North America. And we have the immigration programs to match that sort of stability. And I really wanted to not lose my focus on people. So, you know, I got a lot of enjoyment out of working on really difficult problems for very big companies, but I get way more enjoyment of, you know, finding that solution that's going to work for potentially someone on this call, one of the hundreds we've also helped, really for the first time for some in many years, create that stability, reunite with family, like really be able to plan for the long term. And so, you know, couldn't be happier doing what I'm doing here.
And I'll just add to my story a little bit. Obviously, you know, the challenges, firsthand challenges like AFSA that we faced as international students, that obviously contributed. But the other side of it, for me at least personally, was the business side. There was a void, and this is also for students who are entrepreneurial minded or you know, beyond just looking at opportunities in the US, even if they say have to go back to their home country, to not lose hope, but just keeping that eye on opportunities. So for example, for me at least, and these were tied very closely to my values as well. I didn't want to I worked in non-renewable energy. I worked for oil and gas, even though I didn't want to. And so it was a really difficult pill to swallow when I was working for oil and gas, because that's completely the opposite of what I wanted to do in my life. I attended Berkeley with the goal of joining renewable energy, solar energy companies. But when I graduated, there were no jobs for international students in those spaces. So anyway, so the long story short, when I came back to the US, part of me which attracted to this business, or when we spotted this opportunity, was the fact that I had served as an MBA consultant. So I knew there was an opportunity that existed with international students. And one thing that went through my head was that I wasn't contributing pollution, or we weren't producing plastic or selling plastic. We weren't contributing to global warming. Maybe indirectly, international education does contribute to global warming because students are flying back and forth, but not directly. So day to day, I would feel happy if I'm making a social impact, but at the same time, there's something that would pay for my living. So that really was the business side to the whole equation, where I still wake up and I'm like, okay, I feel very good about what I do, and it's actually fun, and there's minimal negative impact to the world. So those are some other angles which you can look at it.
Thank you so much for sharing that thought process, Nitin. And I will say your positive impact far outweighs the negative in this case. Great, thank you. So the next question for you is Afsha and Nitin specifically, since both of you are former international students, can you share a little more about your career journeys? I mean, you've covered a lot of it already, but what were some backup options or alternative pathways you explored or took along the way?
Would you like to go first, Nitin?
Sure. Thank you. So for me, one of the things that led me to the H-1B job opportunity was the fact that I found an internship during a junior year of my undergraduate education with a Fortune 500 company. And so I knew for a fact that they would offer a full-time position. So that way I was, my plan A was pretty solid. So I tried hard to work or find, and that's where Addie, and I'm sure you tell this to your students as well. Startups can be glamorous. Some companies can sound very cool and sexy on paper, but if they don't have the history of sponsorship, if they haven't sponsored employers or international students, there's a long journey to educate those employers. And the last thing you want to do as a student is to go through that experience of educating employers. That's AFSA's job, and you don't want to, really take that role. So for me, the primary plan A was pretty solid. That even despite that, I was about to lose, and that was the first year the lottery process went into place. And this was in 2007. So I was studying abroad last semester. I was in Slovenia, and suddenly I received an email from Citigroup. They said, "Oh, by the way, this year the government has made it a lottery process, so there's no guarantee you'll get your H-1B." So had I lost it, I would have not even been able to enter the US again. From Slovenia, they would have sent me back to Nepal straight away. And then came, after 3 months of discussing, because this was such a new thing for the companies itself, they said, "Oh, by the way, we figured out plan B for you guys, which is if you lose the H-1B, then we'll move you or relocate you to the London office. And then after a year or two, we'll see where it goes, but maybe you love London so much, so you don't have to even worry about coming back to the US." And for me, that was okay. I was excited. I was young. Younger, I think I'm still young, but anyway, so at that time I was okay with moving to London because I was already living abroad. But yeah, so that was graduate school. When I graduated, my backup option was this L1 visa. So I knew about the L1 visa. Had I not received an offer, I would have tried to work for another international company, work for a year, and then request those employers to move me back. But the default option, bottom line for me, was to start a company wherever I lived. So that, at least for me, being that entrepreneur or being an entrepreneur was the baseline case, wherever I lived.
Amazing. So for me, I had to leave because we had a family emergency, and I worked for my family business for a couple of years. It's a very long story. My father's employees were stealing from him. They burned down a warehouse. Very, very long story. And being the eldest daughter, some of you might know international students, when you're from like a certain background, you're required and requested to come back to the home hub when things happen to the family. So I returned back to England, and I actually had wonderful experience working over there because being in the UK, I started taking up so many positions in my father's company. I started doing the international trade. I started helping them with the investments abroad. But I always knew that my leaving California was premature, and I knew I would have to return. So I actually want to share my story, but a couple of other people I knew at the same time. So I was lucky. I got a green card through my mother, who got it from my grandmother, who did her PhD in the United States. So for me, it was okay for me to come back because I had the green card. And when I came back, I immediately got a job at Whole Foods. Like Nitin, I needed income too. So I ended up actually working at a tobacco company so I could save up, so I could go to law school. And I can't tell you what working at that tobacco company did for me, because to be subjected to those kind of marketing tactics and the kind of things that you do to get people hooked on something, it did not feel very good. And perhaps going to law school was my saving grace. And being someone who didn't get so many great grades when I was younger, I ended up going to a law school in Michigan called Western Michigan University, which is famous for two particular alumni. Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's lawyer, went there. I know, see, that doesn't speak so great, but also Rashida Tlaib, right? The first Palestinian American congresswoman went there. So it was a very non-traditional, unconventional path, but I was able to get into law school. I, again, through all the advice that I received as an international student with my fellow internationals, I became a top student there. I graduated. My first internship and clerkship was with an immigration firm that I met because they did the immigration for USC students. And they were doing my cousin's J1, they were doing his O1, because I was lucky with a green card, but not my family members and friends weren't. So again, that was that USC connection. I passed the bar exam and I got a job actually in the UK of all places, even though all this time I knew I wanted to be in California, but you just go where the chips fall. And so I ended up working at a US immigration firm in London, and I was told, okay, you're brand new. This is such a hard field to get into, corporate immigration. Everybody wants it because it's the actual type of immigration law where you can actually make money. Because, you know, otherwise with asylum, you're not going to make so much money. You're really doing it for the pure help of people. So I was in the UK. I received a decent enough salary, but I wanted to get my door in the field. And again, I got that job through a connection from a USC, someone who I met at USC, my orientation roommate, who told me her childhood nanny does US immigration law in London. So I cannot emphasize the power of this network that you have. I worked there for 2.5 years. I came back, got the job where I was an intern when I was in California from the firm that was the immigration law firm for USC. I received better job opportunities. I was asked to start my own section at a firm. Then we had COVID happen and immigration really just slowed down. So I ended up becoming a contract attorney for Fragaman. And I think, Nitin, I know you love Fragaman too, but I was amazed at these amazing professionals that I work with. And I thought, you know what, I really like this kind of firm culture. And I had taken another bar exam so that I could do a different type of law. But actually joining the right kind of firm, the right kind of people, the right kind of team, I was like, I'm very, very happy here. So that's how I ended up where I am now. And I have the best team, the best bosses. I love what I do, helping people, and I actually get paid well for it, which is frankly quite the dream. But I understand that for me, it was a little easier having the green card. And I had other people I wanted to mention. So my cousin, he did not have that luxury. He was at the USC Film School at the same time as me. His journey was first a J1, then the waiver. So if anyone's familiar with the J1s, you have to do the waiver. And then he did several O1s, until actually maybe 15 years into his journey, he married someone he knew at USC. They were just friends when they were at USC and got his green card through that way. So that's one story. Another story is, I remember my friend, I shouldn't say his name because I don't want to out him, but I remember being like in my junior year of college at USC, and like he was, because he did not like, maybe I was friends with the like bad grades people. He was literally he was deported. Like people came and took him, and he had to go back to Pakistan. And then he became the executive creative director of Ogilvy. So it's not the worst thing in the world if you go back to your home countries. And like another story is, remember how Salman Rushdie, if you're into writing, he went to Oxford University in England. He couldn't stay. He went back to Pakistan and he also worked for Ogilvy. So it's not the worst thing in the world to go to your home country. And you just got to remain open-minded about it all. So yeah, I wanted to share just those few stories that, you know, life can take you in so many different places.
Amazing, Hafsa. Thank you so much for sharing all those stories. I think those were hopefully helpful for some of the attendees to hear. So the next question is for all of you, and it is, what are some resources that international students can use to build career backup plans?
I've said it already. I can just add, I think it's your friendships, your international base, the fact, well, whatever nationality you are, contact your consulates, go to their dinner parties, be friends with your roommates, be an honest, authentic person, do as much networking as you can. Of course, do get the good grades, unlike me, so you can actually have great opportunities. But I think that's my answer. If it's just one word, it's networking. You guys?
Yeah, would definitely share the same, right? Like, you know, there's so much that you can do in the driver's seat, and I think it's easy to get overwhelmed at times, right? And just like it's too stressful. I don't know where to start. I think you obviously got 3 people here with different perspectives that are willing to sit down with you at any time and talk through your specifics. You know, just to bring to life a little bit more about Mob Squad's approach to this, and I should caveat that this is kind of like your big backup option, right? If everything that we've walked through doesn't work here, and you're faced with kind of like that harrowing choice of, you know, either going back to school, doing a day one CPT, or potentially leaving the country. But as Afsha said, hey, you know, sometimes that can work out too. The way that Mob Squad works, we've kind of got 3 ways that we could help all of you on the call. The first is if you have a company that would be willing to work with us and partner with us, essentially what we would do as Mob Squad is hire you as a full-time individual, immigrate you to Canada on an expedited basis. And from Canada, you would continue to support your company just near shore from Canada. So if you're able to do your job remotely and the company's open to that, that's what we do. That's kind of, we offer, you know, turnkey solution. And like I said, some of the benefits to you are the benefiting from Canada's expedited immigration system. So you're looking at Canadian permanent residency within 6 to 18 months of landing. That's comparable to the decade plus it might take for, you know, a successful green card application. So it's a pretty good way, right, in terms of just understanding that. The 2 others I'll just talk about quickly is that we also do have a program if you don't have an employer that's on board, but you still are interested in moving to Canada. In that sense, you would just join our talent pool. We work with you, we build a profile for you, and as opportunities come up, we put you in front of those. And if we find something that works, we just facilitate the end offer there. And the third is, you know, Mob Squad also runs a free online community, and this is more dedicated to actually finding work within the US for current students or recent graduates. So if anyone wants any information on that, it's free to join. It will always will be. And that's something that can help out, you know, with folks that are still in school or still looking for that first opportunity in the US.
So in terms of a resource, I think, you know, the best resource for anyone is an immigration attorney to know all the options based on your passport, based on your citizenship and multiple passports that you might have. So I think at certain point, depending on how much you care about staying in the US or working in the US, it might be worth it to consult an immigration attorney because, you know, we are not immigration attorneys. Adi, you can give advice, but you can't give immigration advice. Neither can Afsha can. So if I were any of these students, I would definitely take her offer on on maybe a 30-minute call, but I doubt she'll be willing to offer that unlimited. But yeah, so just coming back, ultimately from an immigration standpoint, it's really an immigration attorney that can help you. And I wouldn't take other students' advice or just browsing through websites and resources because you never know what's right and what's wrong. And ultimately, it is a little bit personal because it's based on your nationality. But more from a strategic standpoint, what I would suggest is to have, again, a base case of what your worst case scenario will be. So you could plan for H-1B, you could plan for L-1, you could, but there's a possibility that none of those work. Even Mob Squad, and correct me please if I'm wrong, but you know, it's not that every student that wants to move to Canada is able to move. You might be filtering based on STEM or certain talent. So regardless of what you plan from a A-B standpoint, it might not work out. But that C will, because that's your worst case scenario. So just having a really solid C scenario, what would that look like? Going back home, working for a multinational, going back home, starting your own company, going back home. So I think the strategy is very important. And then you can start thinking of all the options and information by meeting with immigration attorneys and consolidating information that you gather from other sources.
Thank you. This next question is specifically for Afsha and Graham. I know Graham sort of covered a lot of this already, but feel free to add more if you have more to add. But what alternatives to H-1B are available to international graduates who want to remain in North America after their OPT expires? And what are their eligibility criteria?
Well, I think I should go here, Graham. Yeah. Do you want to? Yeah, because I first of all, I'll give all like the US options, and then perhaps you can talk about what Mob Squad offers. Exactly. So the first thing is, you know, if you're here on OPT, you just continue going to school. So that's a career decision that you make, right? So if you're doing a bachelor's in a specific topic, you might go back to school to do your master's in that same subject, or then you might go to do your PhD in that same subject. So that's the first thing. There's also CPT, but that would not really apply here because if you want to do CPT, you need to start that immediately. And if you would like to, if you guys want to Google it, I would say Google day one CPT at university. So that might not be an option here, but that is also an option. It's a little controversial because USCIS does look at it with a bit more discrimination. So the first option is continue going back to school. The second one is, I think you're a sophisticated audience, you're all at USC. You are aware that the H-1B is 85,000. So what you'd want to look at is H1, like cap exempt employers. So you'd want to start looking at employers who are non-profit, education, just so look at that. It also depends on your nationality and your citizenship. So you have the choices. If you're Singaporean, you're H1B1. If you're Canadian or Mexican, you can look at the TN visas. If you're Australian, you have the E3 visas. And I'm happy to, again, like Nitin said, you know, you feel free to reach out to me because I don't think it's right for me to give advice on this general call, but I would welcome an email so that I can like talk you through some details if you would like. One thing that I think is worth mentioning that is quite new is that USCIS has come out with guidance now that says if you want to be in the country on a B1 or B2, you are now allowed to look for a job. So, and that was not possible previously. So that gives you some extra time. And then again, based on your nationality, your citizenship, you have other options available. We have the alphabet soup. One of my favorite visa types, frankly, is the E2, and something that probably someone like Nitin loves because it is for the entrepreneurial types. And I have actually helped F1 students with great business ideas with their E2s, as long as that the citizenship and the nationality allows for it. There's also the option of O1 visas. So like I gave you the example of my cousin who was very good in film. He ended up he couldn't do an H1B. It's very hard in film to do that. So he did repeated O1B options. And there are several options. It does require creativity. And I would say, speak to an immigration lawyer, that's me. And I think the reason my advice to you guys was network is because I can't do anything unless you have employment options or employment offers. That is why I think networking is so important, to know the people who can offer you jobs. So yeah, lots of different options. But what's very nice now, again, I would say, is this new B1, B2 guidance where you're allowed to be here looking for jobs, which wasn't possible before.
So as Aksha said, like lots of options, right? And I think the number one for all of you, you know, you've made a tremendous amount of effort and gone through all the hoops to get to the United States, and you know there's lots of ways to try and keep you there. In the worst case scenario, right? I won't repeat sounding like a broken record already. Like you know what the Mob Squad approach to this is. I just think I'll go over two things, just our criteria and just a few notes on the process. So just quickly on the process, one thing that's great about working with Mob Squad is that we can prepare what it would look like. We can, you know, get down to the nth detail of what the arrangement would look like before any decisions need to be made or any fees or anything like that is incurred. Basically, to say bluntly, it's free to get information with us. I can work with you for weeks, months, whatever it is, to make sure that you understand, your company understands what they could be signing up for. And if and only when we want to actually execute that is when things would trade hands there. So even if this is a semblance of interest, you want to see like what it might look like, are you eligible? Our guidance is pleased to reach out. Some general criteria just to keep in mind are kind of 4 points. One is that you ideally have a STEM education or STEM kind of professional background. So anything in computer science, software development, engineering, many disciplines within there. It's not to say that if you don't have a STEM background that we can't help you. We just need to look at a few other creative vehicles. We have worked and helped with folks that don't have that strict STEM background before, but generally makes things a little bit easier. The 3 other things is that you obviously have to be interested and willing to move to Canada. It's a big decision. We try to give you as much information as you can. And once you do arrive, we kind of have a 24/7 concierge service that helps you get set up in the country. It's not just we sign the contract and never see you later. I mean, actually in our Vancouver office right now, we've got a pretty full house today. So we take that pretty seriously. And then two other things is just your company needs to be on board, and that's usually a little bit of education to go back and forth with. And finally, your role must be able to be conducted remotely, right? If there's an on-site requirement, obviously it makes it a little trickier while you're in Canada. So our process is very consultative. We get to know you as an individual. We're not we move as fast as you want to move. And so for many of you that are graduating, you might have 3 years before this becomes a real issue. You don't have to wait until that last attempt, right? We can speak at any time, see if it might work for you, and then take the conversation at your own pace.
Thanks so much for that. And since we have a little extra time on this question, I did want to give a plug to InterStride because InterStride does have a lot of really great training materials under their Learn section on, immigrating to Canada and different visa options, because I know you work very closely with Fragaman. I don't know if you wanted to share anything additional about that, Nitin.
Yeah, I mean, the platform is available to all students free of cost, so there's no reason not to sign in. I mean, it's ultimately, even if you feel that there's no resources, you're not spending any money, so it's definitely worth going in, checking it out, because the career services at USC is offering you this resource. And if you go in the immigration section of under Learn, or the webinars, there's tons of webinars that are offered. So just by signing up also, you'll start receiving our monthly newsletters, and a lot of folks from Fragment's different offices, they present almost on a monthly or sometimes even on a weekly basis. So those are resources. Some of them include, for example, relocating to Canada. Others are around for nursing students. Others are for STEM majors, for business students. So there's a lot of recording stored as well. But once you log in, just click on webinars and you'll see some of these resources automatically.
Thanks, Nitin. So my last official question for all of you before we go into the open Q&A is, what is one piece of career advice that you would give to our attendees?
Yeah. Try to keep this short, but I think, I have a lot of sympathy for a lot of what all of you are going through, but it's very hard to have empathy because it's such a unique experience, right? Of sort of looking over your shoulder with so many uncertainties. We talk about this all the time, especially with the current market, for hiring and just all of the organizational scares, is that even for someone that, doesn't have the issues of figuring out their visa or their status or anything, it's already a pretty tough process. And so, the deck is a little bit stacked against you. But I think what's encouraging, as you've heard on this call, is that there are options, right? And I think one thing that Afshar brought up here is just being open to the adventure, right? It's great to have milestones. It's great to have plans. And I think it's really good to keep yourself on track and motivated. But being open to change, right? What might look like the worst possible situation, like end of the world type of thing, could be a door to another hallway, right? That you weren't expecting. And so a lot of, taking advantage of that is simply mindset. So, for many of you, I think that there's a lot of time to think about this and explore this. I think that there's a lot of people that are ready and willing to help. But putting yourself out there, being open for what feedback and advice you get, it's the best that you can do. But, folks are here to help make this work for you.
So I can chime in, or just continuing what Graham said. So a little more aggressive of a stance I'll take, just because I've been through this experience. And I think the attitude is one part of it, where you want to see this as a challenge and not something you're entitled to. Because I've seen many students where they feel like this is a right, where because they came to study here, you should deserve to work here. So, and I always think of it, if someone tried to work in Nepal, it's almost impossible. Like, good luck trying to get the permits and, you know, finding a job or employment in Nepal. And so for many other countries, right? And fortunately, in the US, there's actually a structured process. So yes, it might not be easy, it might be a little bit challenging, but there is a process, and you could easily carve out different options based on your degree, based on your area of study. So just having that mindset where, look, I came to study, it was very clear during my F1 visa interview that I am supposed to return back home. And looking at the OPT and employment beyond as a bonus, that can make your approach a little bit more less grudgy, and it's more, you know, you'll be freed from that attitude which you might otherwise have. So that's, I think that attitude piece is important, to see this as a challenge. And then when you know, meet immigrants from different walks of life, see that again as an opportunity. How did they do it? So for example, in this case, you heard my story. I had a certain path. And so you speak to 50 other people, and again, the US is a land of immigrants, so you'll meet so many people during your daily, you know, encounters. And so just try to figure out what they've done to stay in the country, if that is something you're interested in. So I think that's really the one thing. And then second, from a career standpoint, and keeping immigration aside, the career advice which I would give, and I think this is something most institutions or universities should provide, is choosing, just understanding the difference between right and wrong. The world is going through so many challenges, right? I mean, there are wars going on, there's plastic pollution, there's climate change. So do you want to be on the right side of that equation or on the wrong side? And yes, there you might have to step on the wrong side to get onto the right side, like I did, for example, with oil and gas, or Afsar did with working for a tobacco company. But I think if you are on the right side, you know, you can at least be hopeful and have a happy career, happy life, no matter where you live. But if you do things that are not aligned with your values, you're doing things just for the money or to be in a certain country, eventually your career won't be fulfilling. So more than the country, I think in order to have a successful career, you need to have a job and work that aligns with your value as a human being. So those are two things that I think are that I would like to highlight, at least.
I'm so grateful for having gone after Nitin, because I didn't know what to say to you guys, because I was thinking that whatever I would say, it's, you're in it right now. You're in the tunnel of difficulty. And I served as a mentor to USC international students last year, and I've got to say it was quite hard, because you do need to have the resilience and you do need to have the mindset. I was going to quote Nietzsche when I read the question. I was like, oh, you know, he who has a why can endure anyhow. It feels like that sometimes. But if I can, you know, zoom out, like super zoom out, like for you just to remember that your people here, it's not just about staying in the country. It's not just about getting the grades. I had a health scare and I was really concerned. And then yesterday I found out that I was okay, you know, so just keep the big picture in mind. You know, you're here, you're living, you have the ability to do anything you want to do. So again, I knew you wouldn't like this answer because you're in it, but like, just remember you have all these great resources at your disposal. I mean, like Nitin's stories are great, like Adi is so helpful. Just don't give up hope there, and just have faith in yourself. It's tough. It's tough, you know? So just, you're lucky to be alive, just that, you know? So keep trying.
Thank you, Afsha, and I'm so relieved to hear everything is okay.
Thank you.
Never fun to have health scares.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone who has typed some questions in the chat. I'm going to proceed with reading some of those. So let's see, we have, this is, I think, probably a good question for Afsha. This attendee says, I'm a theater major and hope to be an actor post-graduation. Since there's no fixed employer for actors, how would I go about moving to the US permanently?
So I would actually need to know a lot more about your situation. So for this one, can I type my, sorry that the phone's ringing. I'm not even in my own office, so I don't even know what to do with this. I'm going to type my email over here. But for performance artists, I'd say something like an 001 but I would really need to know a lot more about your nationality, your background, what your job history has been in the past, your resume. There are so many different things. So feel free to email me, give me a bit more information. And I know that it's a bit difficult right now, but hang in there, keep going.
The next one is, okay. Oh, this is a fun, okay, this is a fun, quick one. So what did you all major in from an anonymous attendee?
International relations.
Commerce, business, finance, and business technology management.
Yeah, I was a finance undergrad, and then MBA was focused entrepreneurship, general management.
And then, okay, so this is a question for Afsha. Again, another film student, I believe. For filmmakers and other artists interested in O1 visa, what activities and recognitions typically increase their chance of securing an O1 visa?
Well, I'll give you the broad answer. You're aware that the O1 visa is the extraordinary ability visa, the creme de la creme. And I'm happy again to talk to you separately, but you will need to show that you are the creme de la creme in your specific niche area. And one big picture example I can give you is that I once did an O1 visa for someone who was a vomit artist. Now, there are not, when I say, but like their job was just to create vomit. And so that you can do, like, just go really specific and niche, like, what is the one tiny thing that I could be the best at? And this was a person who was like the vomit artist for Lady Gaga's music shows. So you 100% can get an O1 visa for being a vomit artist, for instance. So yeah, so go really narrow and specific. That helps the creativity. And then I think you might know, you have to show that you've had distinguished ability. You have to show that you've had critical acclaim. These are all items that I can go through with you one-on-one, and I'm happy to talk about it. But as a big picture, someone who's like, look at it, speak to your immigration lawyer. Let's figure out how we can tailor your situation and your case so that we can give you the best chance. Because just being a film student with a film major, you're not. We have to find that one specific thing that you're excellent at.
Thank you, Afsha. This question is for Nitin. How did you navigate your employer's anxiety or uncertainty about OPT and STEM OPT? And how early in the process did you disclose your F1 status if they did not ask earlier?
So, yeah, I mean, even during my undergrad, the employers that I applied to, they were mostly large employers, especially as a finance major. There were, a handful of brands that I was interested in working with. So it was Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch at that time, and some other big brand names. And I knew they all sponsored because there were other international students from my undergrad that had found jobs and internships at those companies. So there wasn't so much of a question mark around, whether these employers are going to sponsor, what am I going to say? And when these employers asked those questions, I mean, I just made sure I answered truthfully and honestly, because also, and this is something that comes up during the webinars that I present to students, where what should students respond? And the real answer is you have to be honest, because at some point the employers will know that you are an international student. There's no way to hide that fact. So if it's a small or mid-sized employer, you can be, yes, you don't have to voluntarily disclose that information unless they ask it. But whenever they do ask, you have to let them know that you are an international student, you do require sponsorship, because the first day of job, they'll ask you for I-9, which is proof of identity, and you will have to show your green card or your EAD permit or your passport. And so guess what? If you don't have it, you don't begin the work. So there's no way to bypass the process. So as a student, you shouldn't be worried about anxiety or nervousness. You just focus on finding the job. And whenever the employers ask you for the question, then you answer. But don't worry about their problems or their anxiety, because large employers, and Afsha, you can probably add to this, you deal with them probably on a daily basis. I mean, they are used to sponsoring, and they are also used to being denied the H-1B lottery. So often a lot of these companies will have a blanket process in place where they'll run an L1 or relocate a student to a foreign office, like in my case, where Citigroup was willing to relocate me to London office. So all those options are on the table. Employers have done it year after year after year. So it's the students who are most nervous about these because it's new to you. But with large employers, you know, again, it's cakewalk for them because they have companies like, or immigration attorneys like AFSA and other Fragment attorneys who are helping them on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you, Nitin. This next question is for Graham. So this attendee says Canada is capping new student permits starting 2024. And how does this impact immigration rules for Mod Squad?
Yeah, so obviously there's been a lot of changes in the kind of broader immigration conversation in Canada. The good news is that for the vehicles that we use, which is focused on work permits and folks that are of working age, nothing has materially changed here. So we still have access to all the programs that we've been using for the last 6 years here. So far that has had no direct impact on it, but it's obviously very important to us that if that does change, right, we'll make sure to adjust any of our messaging and criteria. But for the moment, you know, all doors are open right now.
Thank you. This attendee is saying thank you, first of all, and then they want to ask if they don't get an internship in the US for the summer of 2024, what would you recommend they do? So options include internship in their home country, research on campus, or anything else to increase their chances of securing a job after they graduate. Does not getting an internship in the US significantly lower their chances of getting the H-1?
So I can go first if that's okay. So if you don't get an internship from a US employer, my backup strategy would be to look for a large name employer in your home country and then use that to find a full-time position. Because you still have a big brand name, you've worked internationally for a large reputable company, and an employer, when they are looking at your profile or your resume, they recognize that brand, they recognize what you've done. So it's very, very easy to bring those skills to the employer that went for a full-time position. The only difficult part is like in my case, again, the junior year internship that converted to a full-time position senior year, those are structured programs. So you don't have to interview again for that full-time position. It's almost like a cakewalk. Again, just you know, they give you an offer, you sign up. Senior year of college, you can pretty much not even explore or look for jobs, although you should also still look for a backup option, just because you might get a better offer. But that it reduces a lot of anxiety around that final year of your college, because now you can really enjoy, you have a full-time job opportunity. But there's no guarantee again with the H-1B process, because that can be denied. So I think that's really the difference between finding an internship abroad for your junior year but if it's a sophomore year, that's completely different, because I doubt any internships during your sophomore year can convert to a full-time position after you graduate. So hopefully I answered that question.
That's great. I don't know if Afsha, if you had anything to add to that as well.
So I like Nitin's answer, and I think it's particularly pertinent for, say, finance, for instance. I don't know what your field is. So, for example, if you're in like the sciences or whatnot, I would really try to see if you can be on the university or find these nonprofit companies, although I was saying that you have no opportunity, but it really does help if you can. And I wanted to add something to what I said earlier. If you are able to find a non-cap employer, then if you decided to change jobs and wanted to do a different employment, you would have to be subject to the lottery again. So you might find that job, but it still means that if you wanted to transfer H-1B to somewhere else, that you'd have to go through the lottery again. I really like Nitin's answer, to be honest with you. And I would just again say, widen the circle, widen the scope. I understand that sometimes you have to apply to 100 to 500 places, but I think the university does have lots of internship opportunities and clerkship opportunities or at USC itself. So develop those relationships with your professors. And I know the people I've mentioned in the last couple of years, they've done that and they've had success. So that's the practical experience I can bring from the last couple of years.
Thank you. Let's see, another question. Well, this one's also for Afsha, since you're still unmuted. Could you speak more about the diversity visa the US has in place?
Why? I don't see this. You mean the green card lottery? Do you mean the green card lottery?
Diversity, the diversity green card.
I think
Right?
I think it depends on which country. It depends on which country you're. I think that's what you mean. It depends on which country you're from. In which case, you should totally do it. Yeah, it's a lottery. Do it. So I hope I've answered that. I think that's what you mean.
Yeah, you would have to just look it up on the USCIS website, which if you're eligible for that.
Yeah, depending on which country you're from.
So let's see. So this attendee also is asking Afsha a question. So this is a Singaporean grad student at USC, and his wife is on an H-1B. He's curious to seek advice about whether he should be seeking an H-4 or use his OPT first or apply for H-1B independently. The goal is to get green cards for both of them.
I have a couple of answers for you. I am not going to give legal advice on this call. Please email me. You actually have good options. So I will tell you that you have very good options. And I think somebody else from this this group has emailed me already with a similar question. So I will answer my emails soon after. But you have good options. I just want to tell you that.
Okay, typing email option. Thank you. All right. Let's see. Okay, so this question would probably be more for Nitin, since you've started a company. This attendee is asking, they're participating in pitch competitions in the US, and they're wondering how much capital is needed to start a company as an international student in the US, and then what does the process look like to start a company? It's a long question, but maybe a short
I think
version.
the question might be actually better geared towards Afsha, because I think what the person is trying to ask is how much capital is needed to get some sort of visa, because capital is determined by the business model. It has nothing to do with the student being international or domestic, right? I mean, depending on if you're trying to put together an industry or some sort of a manufacturing plant, the capital requirements are really high because the business needs a lot of capital to set up that plant. For say a technology product, if you're trying to build a prototype, could be very little. It could be $50,000, could be $20,000. So that depends a lot on what you're trying to build or what you're trying to set up. But from a visa standpoint, or say you're trying to apply for an O1 visa or some other immigration, maybe Afsha, you have a better answer for that?
Well, it's very hard to give numbers to these type of things. That's why I like the question going to you as a business person. You know the business realities. I feel like USCIS doesn't realize the business realities sometimes. They're like, you can't do this visa. You need $100,000 to do this. But it's not true. It's always about the argument that you can put forth. So it's better. It's a better business question. And as an immigration lawyer, I would just make the argument for you based on the business reality. But so it's a little bit of both. It's immigration plus business. So,
but yeah, I think just regarding that international student, it has nothing to do with being an international student, because imagine if I was an American student or an American individual, the capital you would need to start a business would still be the same. So just because someone is international doesn't make the requirements for a business any different, because it takes $500 to register an LLC. So anyone can do that. And whether you're domestic or international. In fact, I registered for an LLC maybe first year after I graduated, and never started a company for like 20 years after that.
Thank you. So I think we're out of time for questions, but I had a few people asking if you're willing to share your contact information. If so, just if people have follow-up questions, because I did see a few about like, H-1B and green card, and then about Canadian green cards. So probably for like Graham and Afsha specifically for those. But if you're willing, please feel free to type your contact info in the chat. And if not, that's okay too. I think a lot of these questions also like about CPT, I could answer in an appointment for those of you who have that question. So yeah, thank you again, panelists, so much for all of your time. You've been very generous with your responses and open, and I really appreciate you sharing your experiences and your expertise with our students. I do hope it has been valuable to everyone who attended. And then, as I mentioned, it's being recorded, so I will be posting the recording on the Career Center YouTube channel next week. So you'll be able to find that there as well. Yeah, thank you so much.